Hey y'all, Kenny here. Thanks for joining me today. I'm using hide glue to fill the wood grain on this Rosewood guitar that I've been working on. It's a method I used for my first build. I abandoned that method for the filler products that are made for this purpose. I've used Aqua Coat, which is a water-based clear filler with mixed results. I've used epoxy, which works great, but to me requires so much labor to sand it. I've used the various wood-based paste fillers. So I'm going back to hide glue on this instrument, and maybe I'll remember why I abandoned it in the first place. Now, one thing that's necessary when you're using hide glue, you have to keep it warm, and I'm using a double broiler here. I just have a pot of water with another container that holds my glue, and this is at about 100 degrees or so. It's not really hot, but just keeping it warm is a necessity. I buy my hide glue by the pound. I'm also going to use some Rosewood sanding dust that I've saved for the purpose. I'll be using a old driver's license to apply the glue to the surface. So I'm going to stir up my glue real good, getting a skin on top, and we don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and put some dust into the wood grain. Then I'll pour a little hide glue on. And start spreading. You have to work pretty quickly because this stuff sets up pretty fast. So it's been about an hour and a half since I applied the hide glue to the back. It was probably ready to sand within the hour I started sanding it. As you can see, I'm using 320 grit paper. And as you can see, this sands off easily. No corns on the paper. I got this idea from a neighbor who worked in furniture. And he said that they finished high-end tabletops this way. The tabletop would be on a conveyor, went under a rubber roller that applied the hide glue, would go to a set of heat lamps to dry, and then through a sander, and then return for another coat if it needed it until the top was glassy smooth. Then they would spray on the top coat. So this may need one more light coat of hide glue. I don't know, after I get it all sanded down, I'll inspect it and see. So I had the back sanded down. It took about 30 minutes to do that. I can see some of the hide glue dust in the wood grain, so I know that I'm going to have to make another pass at this. But I wanted to show you there's two ways you can go. You can either leave a thin coat of the hide glue on the guitar, which is what I did on my first guitar, and it really gives it this vintage look. But if you're going to remove all the hide glue, you have to be careful because it'll definitely show through. You see the splotches. Rub a little bit of mineral spirits on here. And you can see everywhere there is hide glue on this guitar. So I have my side sanded down. I told you earlier it took about 30 minutes to sand the back. Took about an hour to sand the sides. I did it all by hand with 320 grit paper. I'm a little reluctant to use a sander on a guitar at this stage in the build. If I were working on a tabletop or something of that nature, I'd use a sander to level it. Now my original plan was to leave a thin coat of hide glue on this guitar and finish over it. I did that on my first guitar, which was oak, and it made it look vintage. But this rosewood just doesn't pop under the hide glue like it does under shellac or lacquer or an oil-based finish. So I went ahead and put a seal coat on. I started out trying to use shellac, and I found that it made the hide glue in the down in the pores get tacky. So I put a thin coat of boiled linseed oil on, and while that was still wet, I worked the shellac in. The two mixed together real well, and it really made this this guitar come alive. Now I took this outside and inspected it in natural light. My eyesight is not what it used to be, and I found little tiny streaks down in the pores, and I believe those are mineral streaks. And so for my second coat, I've added some dye to my glue, some dark brown dye that hopefully will hide those. I'm going to use an old piece of t-shirt to apply the glue, and I'm going to go with really thin coats, and we'll see how that does. I have my second coat on. I used a rag to apply several thin coats. It's pretty much dry, but I'm not going to sand it right now. I'm going to wait and let it dry 24 hours to allow for a shrinkage of the glue. I used a razor blade to knock down some high spots. So tomorrow I'll sand it down, and we'll see what we have. The second coat was much easier to sand down than the first. I think the multiple thin applications is the way to go. I'm pleased with the results. There may be a couple spots that I'll need to drop fill, but other than that, I'm good to go. I'll admit it is a bit of a hassle to have to keep the glue warm while you're working, but you can avoid that by buying the liquid hide glue. It is the same stuff, so it should work just as well. Also, you have to wear gloves anytime you're working on your project. If you handle it with your bare hands, you're going to stick to it and leave a smudge. So why did I abandon hide glue as a wood filler after that first guitar? Well, probably because I switched to water-based finishes after that instrument. I finished it with oil-based, and so that was not a problem, but I've overcome the compatibility issue with this guitar by sealing it with the combination of the boiled linseed oil and shellac. As far as I know, hide glue compatible with any finish other than the water base, the polys, a lacquer, or any oil based. But don't take my word for that. Have a test board. You also need to check for adhesion issues, or possibly that the top coat could react in some way to the hide glue. But I think if you give it plenty of time to dry, you won't have a problem with that. So what would I do differently the next time? I think that if it's a dark wood, I would add dye to the glue, especially for that first fill. I also would like to try mixing pumice with the glue and using that as a filler. I think it would fill the grain quicker. A lot of people use pumice and shellac as a grain filler, so it should work well with the hide glue. Thanks for watching. When I get this guitar finished, I'll post a video. Subscribe to my channel. You're going to want to see this.